Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Bright Business Owner podcast. I'm your host, Ellis Daniel, and today I'm joined by three brilliant Bright HR colleagues. We have Wayne, Harry, and Anita. Thank you all for being here. So when we're talking about everything Gen Z, we're talking about those born between 1997 and 2012. And Gen Z actually comprises of 1/5 of current employees, and it'll be 1/3 of employees by 2030. Wayne, why is there so much buzz around managing Gen Z?
Well, because we're here, and we're here to stay. And kind of like you said, to be honest, the stats speak for themselves. If it's 1/5 of the workplace, if you've got 100 people in your company, then that means 20 of them are going to be Gen Z. So naturally, people tend to be the biggest and most important investment that a company has, or the most important asset. And so let's be honest, it's in the company's interest to get the best out of 20% of its workforce.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I actually agree with Wayne, because as well, if you're looking at 1/3 by 2030, you've got to look at the age as well at which these Gen Z workers are. They're going to probably be in higher management roles by that point in time. So it's in the business's interest to understand these employees before they get to the point where they're taking over the companies that they're working for.
Obviously, every generation has its opinions. Every generation likes to compare to each other. They like to tease each other, whether it's boomers versus Gen X, Gen Z versus Gen Alpha. But ultimately, when we look at Gen Z, the Gen Z are the first digital native workers. They graduated during the pandemic. They're used to the kind of technology that older workers potentially might struggle with. With that in mind, and obviously with Gen Z being great with technology and using things like AI every day, why do some employers have such a problem with that?
I think the real reason why they have a problem with the usage of AI is just more of a lack of understanding from both halves. I think for young workers, AI is a great tool because they understand that tool so they can utilize it efficiently and properly. But for businesses, it can be quite scary because we've all seen recently, businesses that are getting caught putting data into things like ChatGPT and then potentially risking GDPR security and things like that. So I think with the right understanding, the right tools in place, AI could be an asset for a company, but at the moment, it's just a lack of understanding between, for example, the boomers and the Gen Z generation.
Absolutely. And if you look at the statistics, 78% of UK workers already use generative AI at least weekly, and 40% use it every day. Anita, why do you think that would be a problem in a workplace, for example?
I think it can be a little bit frustrating for employers when, Gen Z, people like ourselves, have been introduced to this new whole idea of using AI. I know for myself especially, I'm using it for the most basic things, whether that's, drafting an email or just searching a really easy question online rather than using my, people around me, the resources around me that employers are providing. And obviously, when a company or an employer is paying you to do a certain job, but you're relying on AI, well then why are we here? It doesn't really make sense. So really, Ellis, I think that is the problem that, businesses have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there is a training gap there as well. I think those businesses that work more effectively with AI and provide that level of training ultimately are going to achieve more as AI integration fits further into society, really. But I think the result currently, because we've got some businesses that are collaborating and collaboratively using AI versus businesses that don't use AI at all or completely forbid it, the result is a widening gap. And there are some employees that are eager to use AI every day to streamline or perhaps push their skills to a new level, to those who are struggling to keep relevant, essentially. Obviously, there are a lot of ways that we use AI here at Bright HR that has been discussed in a previous podcast, so feel free to check out that resource. And, whilst we're still talking about AI, I did read a stat the other day that half of Gen Z colleagues are actually helping older colleagues on how to utilize AI and, how to sort of, again, push their skill set to that new level. With that in mind, do you think managers are worried about Gen Z replacing them through the use of AI?
I think naturally we're going to eventually. It's inevitable that a new generation will take over. I think where the concern is the speed of it, because if we're training them on how to use AI and then we're also using AI in the workplace, that's a question of what are they doing for us if we're the ones that are helping them with all them processes. So I think it could potentially be just a lack again of understanding?
Yeah, I think I think yes and no. I do think, like Harry said, there's a sense of inevitability. Obviously, one generation comes, one generation goes. But there's certain things that AI can't teach. Certain techniques based on experience or certain ways of doing things. And so the past generations will always have an important place in the workplace.
Definitely, and I think the experience of anybody who has tenure within a business, they know everything about that business. That speaks volumes in comparison to an American piece of AI software that knows nothing about the business. So yeah, I do think that experience definitely plays its part. But there is a statistic that a third of Gen Z turn to AI for help before they turn to their managers for help. What do we think about that?
Well, I mean, I've always been taught since I was very young to use a buddy system. If you was going to go to your manager about something, then make sure you've asked your colleagues beforehand and make sure you've tried all avenues before you go to your manager. And if AI is now an avenue that we can go down to use for simple questions, simple tasks, then it seems like it'd be one of the likely uses of it to go to the AI to ask a simple question before going to your manager and potentially wasting their time.
Buddy system, that was good back in school.
Yeah.
You're taking me back, man.
Yeah, I do think there is definitely a use there, especially if it's something that's perhaps common sense, but it could be something that's really company specific and therefore AI might give you the wrong answer.
Yes.
And I think that's why you should always maintain that human element of seeking support. Yes, AI is brilliant, it has that level of artificial intelligence, but you should always have that human interference and let humans perhaps set the boundaries of when you can use AI and how you can use it responsibly. And whilst we are maintaining that human element, I think our BrainBox Plus platform is a really good example of how to use AI responsibly, because it's not just scouring the internet for any resource that could perhaps provide you with an incorrect answer, especially when we're talking about employment law. It's serious business. It's using all of our internal documents and our internal resources to really provide that answer and make sure that it's a structured answer based on employment law legislation.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point because we've probably all heard the expression AI slop, right? And there is a lot of slop, and usually slop, it's low quality, and it's low quality because it's very generic. However, when you have an actual expert who's been able to help piece things together for you, and perhaps it's with using that information from that expert into AI, the results are a lot better, more specific and more actionable. And it goes from being slop to being something you can actually use. So yeah, 100% agree with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think if more businesses took that into mind and started making kind of their own bespoke systems that they know that they could plug their own data into, I think it would clear a lot of the confusion up around AI and the usage of AI within businesses. I think it's more just having the relevant things in place to allow your company to use AI efficiently and properly.
So there's lots of talk about Gen Z changing jobs all the time, job hopping, and not having any loyalty to their employers, essentially. I don't think that's necessarily true. It's not something I've seen at Bright HR, but I do think that perhaps that there is that trend. And I think that it comes from a place of, social media being that place of perfection. You're always striving for that perfect job that has the perfect perks that allows you to travel and have an Instagrammable life, for example. And I think that's perhaps where that reputation sort of stems from. But I do think there is a lot of positive to take from that as well. Yes, maybe Gen Z are striving for that perfection, but maybe that's not such a bad thing. We're not going to put up with the dead end jobs that don't provide you with anything. I don't know what you guys sort of think about that.
I think that's a really good point, Ellis, and I don't think it's a negative thing that people like us have the ambition to sort of switch between different roles. And I think compared to the millennials or people before us, I don't think there was that much of an option and a range in terms of job roles. Now there, like you said, social media, we see it all. There's so much out there. It's not just a 9-to-5 office job. And I don't know about you, but for myself, I'm constantly on social media. I see people on TikTok, they're making careers from just literally making videos. And you do think to yourself, why can't I do that rather than sitting in the office 9 to 5? So I think it's good that we're very open-minded compared to probably people before us. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think there's a level of awareness as well. You know, you see more into people, you see more of an in-depth view of people's lives these days than you ever have before. You know, prior to social media, you wouldn't really know what somebody was getting up to or what their holiday was like unless they pulled out a photo album and showed you. But these days, it's so easily accessible that you can think, oh, I want a slice of that. That's the life that I want.
Yeah, I think it's because we can literally just sit there in our evenings after we finish our jobs that could be difficult. It could have been a long day, and then all we can see outside of work is these people that have these ideal lives that, let's be honest, we all want. We all want to be sat on a beach somewhere nice, doing, you know, not work, but we do have to work. But yeah, I think it does come with its caveats. Obviously, we are more ambitious as people, but that can then lead us to maybe change jobs more frequently because we're always chasing unrealistic goals that are set to us by people that we don't know and have never even seen in real life or in the flesh. It's just...
I think that this job hopping thing, it's definitely more of a trend with Gen Z. I think, I don't know exactly why, but I feel like Gen Z, they chase development and excellence. You know, they want to be really good at what they do. And so if a company doesn't offer them the type of progression and development that they want, then they'll just move on to the next company, the next thing, this, that, and the other. However, if you're in a role or in a company where there is a clear progression structure, not just in terms of job title, but as well in terms of skills that you can gain in the job, then I think you'll just see a higher retention. Gen Z will want to stay.
Absolutely. I think Gen Z have sort of led the way in terms of changing what that benchmarking looks like for a business. You know, how much do we have to cater to our employees and their needs and their wants? And I think perhaps previously Gen X do put up with a lot more than perhaps Gen Z do. But, you know, somebody's got to pave that way and really change the landscape, really.
I was just going to say, I think personally myself, like when I was looking at job roles, especially when I came here, I wasn't looking at here from a pay perspective. It was more from where I can go in 2 to 5 years here. So for me personally, making a decision on where I wanted to work, it came fully on where I could go from this place, not on what I was getting paid out the gates. So I think it does make a big difference on where we see ourselves going as well in 2 to 5 years.
I think another great point, you know, even for myself in the situation, obviously my career here at Bright HR was my first role since I graduated, and, you know, being Gen Z and with this being my first corporate role, I think when it comes to sort of applying for jobs now, what employers want to see is experience. And if we have the option now where we can apply for different roles and get that experience, I don't think it's necessarily because we're not, you know, comfortable in one job or we're getting bored of the same role. I think it looks better on your CV to have different sort of roles to show that you've had that experience in different sort of, you know, jobs really. So I think it's good.
Yeah, and with all of those really interesting points, I think a really good topic to discuss is flexible working. I think there is this perception, especially with the shifts in flexible working legislation, that Gen Z just want to work from home. You know, they want to do as little office work as possible. They just want to sit on the sofa all day, potentially, watch a bit of Netflix. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, just sit all day and not work and get paid.
Yeah, basically.
No, I actually think that a lot of Gen Z want to have collaboration. You know, I've got a lot of, well, not a lot, but a couple of friends who work remotely, and sometimes they do say that they would rather work hybrid, or sometimes even just with people permanently, because there is a real collaboration. And I feel that we all know what it was like in the pandemic, where we couldn't really go out and see anyone. We couldn't really have that face-to-face contact with people. And I think that that's sort of in our mind. I think a lot of people, even if they do like the idea of remote work, I do think collaboration is important. And I think a lot of Gen Z probably share my opinion. Who knows? We need to ask them, I guess.
I don't think it was so much that we wanted the remote work. Like Wayne said, we couldn't control when the pandemic happened. It happened for us, for a lot of Gen Z, during a point when we was finishing exams, doing graduations, college. We was all in that bracket. So I think for us, the world just changed, and we had no choice on whether we was going to go hybrid, remote, or back into the office. So I think for most of them, yeah, we would prefer to work with people. It's not very fun just having a whole team of people that you speak to over Teams and don't actually get to speak, collaborate, even if it's just socialise outside of work. I know that being in an office, we get that opportunity at least once a day where we can actually go out the office with each other and build that kind of team relationship and bond, rather than it just being a Teams message, do this, do that, and then nothing else from that. It's not exactly a fun way to work.
Don't know, bro, you've never invited me.
Until tomorrow.
I think one thing that, we can probably admit is that our generation are very lazy. And, with things like social media, technology, we have become to a position where it's just easier to sit at home and do everything from your phone. So as much as, being collaborative and being in the office with, alongside your team is good and probably, makes more sense for the business, I know sometimes I would much rather just prefer to be typing away from home.
Split down the middle.
Yeah, I don't agree with you. I don't agree with you on that one, Anita. I would say we're not lazy as a generation. I would say that we are taught to use our time more efficiently and more effectively. So if we could have a remote role, then you've got that time in your day to do the dishes, to do the washing up and the washing that you've left. You've got the time to do your household chores so that you can go and focus on, even in your private life, achieving that perfection of going to the gym, because everybody needs to have the gym body and you want to be dressed in the best clothes. So you might want to have a side hustle. Talking of side hustles, there is a huge amount of Gen Zs that have a side hustle, mainly because of money worries. I know a lot of my friends have separate businesses. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, no, we were actually talking about this yesterday, innit?
Yeah, so I mean, for myself, although I'm working full time here at Bright, I'm also working another job on the side as a dance teacher. And I don't think that's necessarily because I feel like, I need that financial support or my job isn't paying me enough. I think it's just, why can't we have, keep our passion and hobbies at the same time as working a full-time role? I think it's good to have a full-time role because, having that experience, and I've just graduated, I want to get that experience and see what the corporate world is like. But then at the same time, working shouldn't mean that I have to let go of my passion and, hobbies and interests. And I think if you can handle it and you can manage it, then it's a good thing. Obviously, in different situations where it might be down to sort of your job isn't, financially providing enough for you, and you're having to work for that reason, that can be a little bit stressful for, people in our generation. But I think it's ultimately down to you at the end of the day, what your choice is with that.
Yeah. I think it's only natural that we have side hustles. We said earlier that we're, as a generation, more ambitious. So I think naturally we're going to be chasing more money. We do have the lifestyles that we chase on Instagram as well. I think where it becomes a bit dangerous is that I've seen a lot of stats on this recently. There was a rise up to 30% on kind of underage gambling in kids and young teenagers. And on the side of that as well, all these unrealistic kind of financial traders and things like that. And if you've got an ambitious person that wants to be like this other person, they're telling them to put money into an account or do this and that. I think naturally some people will fall into a negative bracket of a side hustle where they're just jeopardizing their livelihood for a bit of extra kind of money on the side.
Yeah, I'd say definitely there are there are some dangers to it. And I think I agree with what you're saying, that a lot of the times I think Gen Z are just very good at monetizing their passion. And I think that perhaps it's more a case of that than simply the fact that they feel they need to. Just good at it.
Yeah,
So why not?
absolutely. Yeah, but I think definitely positives and negatives. But I do think, interestingly, everything we've discussed so far keeps coming back to that striving for perfection, being those ambitious people and being that ambitious generation where you want to be the best of the best. Maybe that's something for us all to think about after today. But I mean, with all of these topics, and these potentially aren't topics that a previous generation would have discussed openly, and with that in mind, obviously we've probably all been called a snowflake at some point. In my experience, we are used to talking about the untalked about things like mental health. And I don't think that's a bad thing personally, but I wanted to get your perspectives on that.
Yeah, I think talking about mental health, I think it's a very good thing. I feel that in past generations, perhaps looking at my parents' generations and things like that, mental health struggles are not really talked about as much, certainly not amongst men. And I feel like that internalization of all that pressure, it's like, it will just build up at the end of the day. I think that being able to talk about it and have an outlet is so important for your overall mental health. And I think it's a very good thing that we do that.
Yeah, I think there's been a massive push, especially I've noticed over the past, say, probably 3 to 5 years, especially in men's sports where they're pushing for men to speak out about mental health and keeping on top of their own personal well-being. But again, I think for men, I'm not disregarding women, but for men, I think it is quite difficult, especially with online personas that are all over the place, promoting topics like manosphere kind of topics where you've got to be this perfect type of man, do certain things to be qualified as a man. And I think that can take away from especially younger generations, like the one below is the alpha generation, where they're getting force-fed information that's saying this is what the ideal man looks like, this is how they should act, and they don't cry and they don't talk out about things, but really it should be the opposite way around. I think men should be able to shed a tear every now and again and speak to their friends about things like that, because at the end of the day it's helping us.
I think our generation has actually helped a lot in terms of providing that support for mental health. I think for myself, coming from a South Asian background as a female, I think growing up, mental health has always been sort of a taboo topic for, adults and a lot of the people in my culture, I guess. So having, being able to come, to work and have that mental health support is a great thing, because I know there's certain topics that probably that can't be discussed at home, but I know I've got that support at work. So, I think our generation has really helped, and it's a great thing to have.
Very eloquent, Anita.
Is that good?
Yeah,
I'm really in my flow right now.
Yeah.
So with all of that in mind, we're talking about mental health support, we're talking about opening up on those taboo topics. Obviously, when we're approaching management, we're approaching, people in powerful positions, essentially, when it comes to the corporate lifestyle. How can we ask our employers for help, aside from just going in and saying, give me a pay rise?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things, to be honest. I think one of them is you got to show your intent. And so managers are busy people and they're just human. So if you feel something and you never say it, then, a manager might not pick up on the fact that you're going through something or you need a bit of help. So I think we do carry some onus to be able to just go and speak. And the other thing is just be honest. Just be honest about what you're going through and if there's anything that can be done to accommodate your needs. I think that's 101.
Yeah, I personally just believe that you're not really going to get anywhere unless you just lay what you need out on the table. I think there's no point in beating around the bush. And I also think that if you're in a place where you want to work and your employees understand you, understand how you work, there should be no issues with just being upfront and open about what it is you need from your management and what it is you need from your workplace. So I'd always just take the upfront approach and just lay all my cards out on the table personally.
So if we take everything into account that we've discussed today, plus obviously our own perspectives and the challenges perhaps we've faced, in our lives and our professional lives, I think it's safe to say that Gen Z are perhaps emotionally literate, responsive to honesty and unafraid to talk about taboo topics like mental health. And we really value an open conversation, whether it be about financial struggles, whether it be about mental health, whether it be about flexible working or, wanting to achieve that perfect dream. We are the first digital native generation. We've grown up with economic uncertainty. Most of us started work during a global pandemic, which had not happened for centuries and certainly not in modern civilization. We watched our parents and grandparents struggle with work-life balance, burnout, managing a family whilst, not having any flexibility in their corporate lifestyles. But I think we are the first generation that are really breaking that mold. We're taking career breaks. We are prioritizing, upskilling over monetary values, but also looking at side hustles and monetizing our passions and interests. And I think that Gen Z have a lot of really interesting skills to bring to the table, and it's definitely a very interesting topic. Ultimately, if you are a business owner, then it's really important that you take note of the topics discussed here today. As we said in the introduction, by 2030, 1/3 of the British workforce will be Gen Z. Now, if you're struggling on how to manage the younger members of staff within your business, or it just piques your interest in terms of what other trends we can expect moving forward, this is part of a wider conversation. So if you would like to view previous episodes of the Bright Business Owner podcast, you can do so on the Bright HR website. And I can't wait for next episode, and hopefully we can get into some more really interesting topics, guys. But thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks, Ellis.
Thank you for having us, Ellis.